We're going to do a little work on a landscape. If you look up the word landscape, it's an interesting definition, at least in Wikipedia. And it basically says anything that is a wide view of something outdoors. Some people feel that a cityscape is different than a landscape. I personally think a cityscape is just a word we came up with to describe a landscape in the city that usually involves buildings. And a landscape can be anything close up or pulled back so that you see the sky and the horizon and so forth. So I would consider this image, which is a close-up of trees, but I would still consider it a landscape as opposed to a still life, which would be objects perhaps set up in the studio or the figure. Now, as with everything we work on, interpretation is up to the artist. So one does not have to stick with a very literal translation of a landscape. Representative work, I like to use the word representative as opposed to realistic, because what is real is up for interpretation. So representative means an image that represents something in nature or whatever it is we started with. So one can be literal, which would mean translating this image almost exactly as it is in paint or pencil or whatever you're using. Or it could be non-literal and still be representative. So this image, I don't know who this artist is, a wonderful image. It looks like trees. It looks like it could be trees like this, but it is not literal, as in, so far as I know, I've never seen a scene with trees that are blue and pink and red. But it reads as trees, it reads as a landscape, and I find it a very appealing image. We see this in the figure as well. This is a representative image of a face. It is not a literal translation because if you look at it, there's really no skin tone here at all. It's very vibrant color, but again, it represents a face, and this is Pema Chodron, and I've seen photographs of her, so it has a great likeness, so it is representative of her, but it is not a literal translation of her face. And artists, great artists, many artists, use an image to start with, and then they alter it very often to say what they want to say. Now, this image, most of you will probably be familiar with. This is Christina's World by Andrew Wyeth. And this house is now owned by the Farnsworth Museum in Rockland, and it can be toured. So I really wanted to go inside that house and see what this man was inspired by, Andrew Wyeth. So here is the house. This is the actual house. You can go inside of it. Surprisingly, this is the land. Right here is the road. So this expanse of lawn does not exist except in the imagination of Andrew Wyeth. And of course, me being me, I had to try to get into that pose and have my husband take a picture of me. Well, I know that Christina, the real person that this was taken from, had her body was crippled, however, I could not get into that pose at all. I could not get my left arm out where you see it here. I could not get my legs to do that, and then my arm and my torso to do that. And I am quite convinced that she was not twisted in that way in her physical being. I did learn that Andrew painted her from memory. He used her torso and her head he used his wife as reference for that. The rest he made up. And he painted this scene inside the house. So he did not sit out on the lawn and paint this. So there we are. And so my point is, he used this house, this person, this whole feeling of this scene to say what he wanted to say. And lots and lots of people have made commentary on that. So back to our trees. We can do a very literal translation of these, or we can do something from our imagination using that as a starting point. If we wanted to do a more literal translation with colored pencil, for instance, I would be inclined to use my friend's white oil pastel as a resist, and a couple of my art sticks, which are actually colored pencil, same thing that's in here, it's just made in a stick form. But one could just as well use just the traditional colored pencils, and one could do a lovely rendering in graphite, black and white as well, or pen and ink. It'd lend itself to pen and ink. If I were going to, don't have time to demonstrate all of those, but I was kind of having fun with this oil stick, using as a resist, and I was using it to protect, so to speak, the white of that birch tree. I'm assuming it's birch. Because then I could go in with this art stick and get this wonderful straight edge, because the oil pastel will not mark on that if I'm careful. If I want to, it will mark on it and it will blend it. So that was an easy way for me to get the tone, the shading, because that tree is round. I could go in with a little purple to get that coloring, and then go in again on this edge to get that dark stuff that's in there. I'd be inclined to go in with little purple, since I love purple, and purple and green make a nice dark tone. And I could go up here and go in to get the some of that vegetation. As I said, I could use the colored pencil here then to get detail of that vegetation. So that would be one way to work on this scene to get a more literal representational approach.